Most adults grow up learning one rule about protein: eat enough to avoid deficiency, and don't overdo it because your kidneys will pay for it later. That rule was written for 20-year-olds. It was never really updated for what happens to your body after 60. And that gap between old advice and current research is quietly costing a lot of older adults their strength, their independence, and years of mobility they didn't have to lose. Today I want to walk you through what the research actually shows about protein and aging, how much you need, why the old recommendation falls short, how to actually hit the number without forcing down protein shakes all day, and who needs to be more careful. This is not about chasing a trend. It's about a genuinely well-documented shift in nutrition science that most people over 60 have never been told about. Why your protein needs change as you age. Here's the biology in plain terms. Starting somewhere in your 40s and accelerating through your 60s, 70s, and beyond, your body becomes less efficient at using the protein you eat to build and maintain muscle. Researchers call this anabolic resistance. The same plate of chicken that efficiently built muscle for you at 30 does less of that job at 65, even if you eat the exact same amount. At the same time, your body is losing muscle mass on its own, a process called sarcopenia. This isn't just a cosmetic issue or something that only affects people who look frail. Sarcopenia is linked to falls, fractures, loss of independence, and a harder recovery from any illness or surgery, because muscle is your body's reserve tank. It's what your body draws from during a hospital stay, a bad flu, or a broken hip. So you have two things happening at once. Your body needs more protein to build the same amount of muscle, and your muscle mass is already declining. Eating the same amount of protein you did at 35 is effectively giving your body less to work with, at exactly the moment it needs more. The old number, and why researchers say it's too low. Here's where most confusion comes from. The official recommended dietary allowance, or RDA, for protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. That number is decades old, and it was calculated as the minimum amount needed to avoid deficiency in a healthy young adult, not the amount needed to preserve muscle, strength, and function as you age. It's a floor, not a target. Multiple research groups have looked specifically at older adults and come to a similar conclusion. 0.8 grams per kilogram isn't enough to protect muscle and physical function in later life. A well-known set of recommendations from the European Society for Clinical Nutrition and Metabolism, following a dedicated workshop on protein needs in older adults, recommends that healthy older people get at least 1.0 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. For older adults who are already dealing with an acute or chronic illness, or who are at risk of malnutrition, that recommendation rises to 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram. A more recent review of the research on protein and aging put it even more directly. The current body of evidence indicates that older adults need a dietary protein intake of at least 1.2 grams per kilogram per day to maintain optimal muscle function, and some studies suggest a range up to 1.5 grams per kilogram may offer additional benefit, particularly when combined with resistance exercise. Government data backs up why this matters practically. Using the current dietary guidelines for Americans, researchers have found that roughly 30% of men and about 50% of women aged 71 and older are under-consuming protein foods relative to recommendations. That's not a small gap. That's a huge portion of the older adult population quietly running on less protein than the research says they need, turning grams per kilogram into an actual number. I know grams per kilogram of body weight isn't useful unless you can translate it into a real number for your own body, so let's do that. Take your body weight in pounds and divide by 2.2 to get your weight in kilograms. Then multiply that number by somewhere between 1.0 and 1.2 to get your daily protein target in grams, or up to 1.5 if you're recovering from an illness, surgery, or dealing with diagnosed sarcopenia, and your doctor agrees that's appropriate for you. A few examples to make this concrete. A person who weighs 150 pounds is about 68 kilograms. At 1.0 to 1.2 grams per kilogram, that's roughly 68 to 82 grams of protein a day. A person who weighs 180 pounds is about 82 kilograms. That works out to roughly 82 to 98 grams of protein a day. A person who weighs 200 pounds is about 91 kilograms. That's roughly 91 to 109 grams of protein a day. For most people over 60 without kidney disease, landing somewhere in that range, rather than at the old 0.8 gram minimum, is what the current research supports. What that actually looks like on a plate. Numbers on their own aren't very useful. So here's what hitting a target like 80 to 100 grams of protein actually looks like across a day, using common foods. 3 large eggs at breakfast provide around 18 grams. A cup of Greek yogurt adds another 20 grams or more, depending on the brand. A palm-sized serving of chicken breast, about 4 ounces, provides roughly 30 grams. A cup of cooked lentils or beans provides around 18 grams. A scoop of whey or plant-based protein powder mixed into a smoothie typically adds 20 to 25 grams. A cup of cottage cheese provides about 25 grams. A serving of firm tofu, around half a cup, provides roughly 10 grams, and fish like salmon or cod provides about 25 to 30 grams per 4-ounce serving. You don't need to eat unusual or expensive foods to hit these numbers. Most people can get there with eggs, dairy, poultry, fish, beans, and lentils spread across 3 meals, without a single protein shake, though a shake can be a convenient way to close a gap on a day when appetite is low. Why spreading protein across the day matters. One detail the research has focused on that most general nutrition advice misses: it's not just how much protein you eat, it's how you distribute it across the day. Many older adults eat a light breakfast, a modest lunch, and then get most of their protein at dinner. Research on muscle protein synthesis, the process by which your body actually uses protein to build muscle, suggests there's a ceiling on how much protein your body can effectively use in a single sitting to stimulate muscle building, somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 40 grams per meal for older adults, which is a higher per meal threshold than what's typically needed at a younger age. Loading almost all your protein into one large dinner means a lot of it isn't used as efficiently for muscle maintenance as if that same amount were spread across 3 meals. The practical takeaway is simple. Aim for a meaningful amount of protein at each meal, roughly 25 to 35 grams at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, rather than a token amount at breakfast and a large amount at dinner. Why exercise and protein work together, not separately? The research is consistent on one more point. Protein alone does part of the job, but pairing adequate protein with resistance exercise, think bodyweight exercises, resistance bands, or light weights, done regularly, produces meaningfully better outcomes for muscle strength and physical function than either one alone. Several trials looking specifically at older adults found that higher protein intake mattered most and showed the clearest benefit when it was combined with some form of resistance training. Protein gives your muscles the raw material. Resistance exercise gives your body a reason to actually use it. You don't need a gym membership or an intense program. Even simple, consistent bodyweight movements like sit-to-stands, wall push-ups, or light resistance band work, done a few times a week, appear to be enough to meaningfully change how effectively your body uses the protein you eat. Who needs to be more careful with this guidance? This is important, and I don't want to gloss over it. The 1.0 to 1.5 gram per kilogram range is intended for healthy older adults or those recovering from illness under guidance. It is not automatically appropriate for everyone. If you have chronic kidney disease, protein needs are handled differently, and increasing your intake without your nephrologist or physician's involvement could be harmful rather than helpful. Some research has looked at whether higher protein intake harms kidney function in people with otherwise healthy kidneys and found no clear evidence of harm in that population, but this does not apply if kidney disease is already present. If you have any diagnosed kidney condition, or you're not sure what your kidney function looks like, this is a conversation to have with your doctor before making any changes, not something to adjust on your own. If you're on blood thinners, have gout, or have specific dietary restrictions related to another condition, it's also worth a quick conversation with your doctor or a registered dietitian before significantly increasing your protein intake, simply because individual circumstances vary. A simple starting plan: if you want to actually act on this rather than just absorb the information, here's a simple way to start. First, calculate your own target using your weight in kilograms times 1.0 to 1.2 grams and write that number down somewhere visible, like on your fridge or in a notes app. Second, for one typical day this week, write down everything you eat and roughly estimate the protein in each item. Most nutrition labels list protein per serving, and a quick search for protein in will give you a reasonable estimate for whole foods. This isn't about obsessive tracking forever. It's about seeing, just once, where your current intake actually falls relative to your target. Third, identify your lowest protein meal, which for most people is breakfast, and add one specific food to it. Eggs, Greek yogurt, or a scoop of protein powder in a smoothie are the easiest additions. Fourth, if you're not already doing some form of resistance exercise, even 2 short sessions a week of bodyweight or resistance band movements can help your body use that protein more effectively. Fifth, if you have kidney disease, are on dialysis, or have any other condition where protein intake needs special management, bring this information to your doctor or a registered dietitian and ask them to help you set a target that's right for your specific health picture, rather than adjusting on your own. The standard protein recommendation most people have heard their whole lives was built for young, healthy adults trying to avoid deficiency. It was never designed to address the muscle loss that becomes a real factor after 60. A meaningful body of research now points to a higher target, generally 1.0 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day for healthy older adults, and higher still during illness or recovery, spread across meals, and ideally paired with some form of regular resistance exercise. This is genuinely one of the more actionable, well-supported pieces of nutrition science for healthy aging. It doesn't require supplements, extreme diets, or spending a lot of money. It requires knowing your number and making small, consistent adjustments to get there, while checking with your doctor first if you have kidney disease or another condition that changes the picture.